Wherefore, Series 3, Episode 8. When Wambleforth goes back to check the goods shed, it is evident that someone else has been in there. No doubt someone whose job involves the building. Whatever Whitminster's containment magic did, she would never have set it up to stop people working as usual. As a consequence, as soon as anyone opened the door, anything trapped inside the goods shed would have a shot at escaping. The vermin jazz hybrids appear to have left the building. They never really had a plan for dealing with the jazz cyclist. This became painfully obvious once they captured the creature. They couldn't agree what to do next, and none of them were really confident about any other strategy than keeping it off the streets. That had merit, certainly, but it would not have played out well once the building came back into regular use. Either the jazz cyclists would have escaped, or perhaps worse still, it might have stayed and engaged with the venue in some unspeakably awful way that none of the wizards ever wanted to imagine. This is the trouble with running a town. It really is your job to imagine how this sort of thing will play out. In practice, very few people have the stomach for such thinking. No one knows how many of the jazz vermin there were. It's difficult to count things of uncertain shape, especially when they keep moving about, and it isn't clear how permanent they are or what their relationship with the rest of reality is. Wambleforth is fairly convinced that they might be wandering in and out of the holes in reality. They seem to appear and disappear around the town in fairly random ways. When they do show up, it seems to mostly be at night, snorting, trumpeting and honking quietly to themselves as they wander about. What exactly they are doing is anyone's guess. The wizard Wigston thinks it might be productive to gather them up and at least teach them some decent tunes. Whitminster thinks that if they want to carry on with their solo improvised jazz, really no one should interfere with that, as they don't seem to be causing any harm. But do we really know they aren't causing any harm? Winklepicker asks. We don't really know what they're doing, so we can't be sure it's benign. The wizards then get into an extended what's-up argument about how you measure whether something is benign, given that all life forms exist by causing harm to other life forms. Wigston is adamant that plants can be really hostile to each other if only you consider them at the right speed. It is a messy, long-winded and unproductive sort of argument, as is often the way of it with the wizards. Also, since we last saw them as a group, they have discovered the internet. They all knew it was there all along, but while the culture of thwarting each other prevailed, they had no reason to talk to each other in anything aside from the most esoteric and occasional ways. Now they talk to each other fairly frequently in almost cooperative and occasionally useful ways. It is quite a dramatic change, but at the very least they all enjoy getting to disagree with each other far more frequently. Meanwhile, the jazz vermin scamper about at night, snuffling, snacking, having experimental musical experiences with the foxes, and so forth. They turn out to be rather determined little life forms. They like existing and they want to keep doing it. As far as anyone can tell, they are more than the sum of their parts, more than their angry, disruptive, unhappy parents ever were. Unlike the beings that made them, the little jazz vermin rather like existence. They think reality is pretty neat. They want to sniff it, lick it, maybe even chew it a bit. Beyond the desire to enjoy themselves, they don't seem to have much of an agenda. Wambleforth finds a whole group of them out in the street one evening. It isn't really warm enough to have windows open, but the flat in question probably has smoke to vent, and with it comes music. The jazz vermin are stood in a cluster beneath the open window, many of them with their snouts or snoutish parts raised towards the source of the music. Some of them are joining in. Others are moving about to the beat. They're surprisingly charming. Wambleforth wonders what will happen when the venues are open again and music is a more readily available thing. Near the top of the high street, the distinctive form of a mammoth appears for a few moments and then fades away again. This has become a fairly normal occurrence. The Ice Age art turns up all over the place as well. Only a few days previously, someone chalked a bovine sort of creature across one of the roads. They just turn up, these depictions. No one admits to making them. No one seems to acknowledge them, even. Sometimes Wambleforth sees people out at night chalking creatures onto buildings. They all seem to be in a dazed state, and it's never been possible to get any of them to talk about what they are doing. This, too, is probably benign. Probably harmless. Probably. Everything is so entirely peculiar at the moment that there's no easy way to tell what is helping and what is making things worse. The ghostly megafauna are very likely a symptom of reality being in a bit of a mess. But at the same time, they add charm and feelings of enchantment and maybe make things better. How do you tell? No one really knows how anything works anymore. The future is an uncertain country, exotic and hard to imagine. It's difficult to plan a trip there, much less to consider taking up permanent residence. And yet, of course, to be alive will be to live in that place. Nothing is predictable anymore. Uncertainty is perhaps the only certainty anyone has left. In the meantime, perhaps it makes sense to enjoy the weirdness and whimsy as much as possible, to stand in the street and watch the jazz vermin bopping about, apparently without a care in the world. It may be possible to enjoy the not knowing, and to hold on to it as a feeling of adventure and possibility. Everything is going to change, dramatically. But that doesn't mean everything must inevitably be terrible. There is a virtue to cultivate around making the best of it, trying to create as much good as possible. Wambleforth moves a bit closer to the jazz vermin and joins in with the dancing. The little creatures are all apparently fine with this. Delight has never felt more subversive. But there are going to be good things, damn it. There is going to be life and hope and silliness, and perhaps the world won't entirely go to hell in a handcart, proverbial or otherwise. One of the jazz vermin raises an instrumental-looking snout towards the window and produces a fine, if slightly mournful counter-melody in response to the song. The two sounds weave together, the recorded and the improvised, interior and exterior, happy, upbeat dance number and mournful jazz vermin improvisation. It is a beautiful moment.